Have you ever heard a leader say something like that? Or maybe you've heard, this is your last chance. Don't screw it up. Perhaps you've even been on the receiving end of these kinds of threats, where every request comes wrapped in an ultimatum. Here's what I've learned after decades of studying leadership and being around some of the best leaders in the world. Threats are the last resort of leaders who have run out of ideas. And today, I want to show you why threatening your team is not just ineffective, it's actually destroying your leadership credibility. Let's dive in. Let me take you to one of the most powerful leadership lessons in the Bible. It's in Mark chapter 12. This chapter gives us a fascinating study. On one side, you have Jesus teaching in the temple courts. Mark describes crowds of people, throngs of people who loved his message. They were captivated by his wisdom and eager to learn more and to hear more. But on the other side, you have the religious leaders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, the Sadducees. These were people in position of authority, people with titles and power. And how did they respond to Jesus? They saw him as a threat to their authority. So what did they do? They tried to trap him. They tried to intimidate him. They used threats and manipulation to try to silence him. Now, here's what's fascinating. The people in authority felt threatened by someone who was actually serving others. Jesus wasn't trying to take their positions. He was teaching truth, healing people, and serving in the community. But because the religious leaders had built their leadership on positional power rather than earned authority, they saw truth as a threat. And this is exactly what happens today when leaders resort to threats. When you threaten your team, you're telegraphing a crucial message. My authority isn't enough. My credibility isn't enough. And my leadership, it's not enough. So I have to resort to fear and intimidation. Let's be honest about why some leaders turn to threats. I see the pattern in churches and in nonprofits and businesses every single day. Leaders threaten their teams because they reach the end of their leadership toolbox. They have no more tools in the toolbox. They don't know how to inspire. They don't know how to motivate. They don't know how to develop people. So they resort to the only tool they have left, and that is fear. Think about it. A leader who has to say, there's plenty of other people I can call, is admitting they haven't built loyalty. A leader who has to say, this is your last chance, is admitting they haven't developed competence in their team. A leader who has to add an ominous ultimatum to every request is admitting they haven't earned respect. Here's the brutal truth. Leaders who use threats are people who have run out of ideas. They have no personal credibility. And although they may have a title on their door and a position on the org chart, they have little earned authority in the hearts of people. I really love this quote. There are no hopeless situations, only leaders who have run out of ideas. When you feel like you need to threaten someone to get results, that's not a statement about them. That's a statement about your leadership capacity. Let me tell you what happens when you threaten your team. You might think you're motivating them. You might think you're setting clear expectations. You might think you're showing strength. But here's what your team actually hears. My leader doesn't believe in me. When you threaten someone, you're not saying, I know you can do better. You're saying, I don't think you're capable. So I'm going to use fear to try to squeeze performance out of you. That's not leadership. That's manipulation. Second, they hear, my leader doesn't respect me. Threats are fundamentally disrespectful. They treat people like commodities rather than valued team members. They say, you're replaceable rather than you're valuable. And once you've communicated disrespect, you've lost the foundation for any healthy working relationship. Third, they hear, my leader is desperate. This is the most damaging message of all. When leaders resort to threats, it reveals their own insecurity. It shows they don't have the influence to inspire. They don't have the credibility to persuade. They don't have the relationship to motivate. So they fall back on the cheapest, most destructive form of motivation, which is fear. And here's the irony: the very act of threatening someone proves that your authority isn't enough and your talent isn't enough. You're basically admitting that you can't lead through inspiration. So you have to lead through intimidation. So, what's the alternative? How do you lead someone who isn't performing? How do you motivate when results aren't happening? How do you drive accountability without resorting to threats? Their answer is this: you build earned authority, you develop genuine influence, you create real credibility. Let me give you three practical alternatives to threats. First, have honest conversations. Instead of threatening, try this: I've noticed these specific areas where we're not hitting our goals. Help me understand what's happening. What obstacles are you facing? What support do you need from me? Notice the difference. You're not threatening, you're partnering. You're not intimidating, you're collaborating. You're putting it in a framework of team and us versus them. Second, provide clear expectations and support. Most performance issues aren't motivation problems, they're clarity problems. People want to succeed, but if they don't know exactly what success looks like, or they don't have the tools and training they need, threatening won't help. Equipping them will. Third, make tough decisions when necessary. Here's what many leaders there's a huge difference between threatening someone and making a difficult personal decision. Sometimes, after you've provided clarity, support coaching and support them with other opportunities. You realize someone isn't the right fit for the role. That's not a threat, that's leadership. But it only works if you've done the hard work of developing people first. That's on you. Think about it this way: Jesus didn't threaten the religious leaders back. He didn't fight fire with fire. He continued to teach truth, serve people, and demonstrate authentic leadership, authentic servant leadership. And ultimately, people followed him not because he threatened them, but because he served them. Let me give you some practical steps to build the kind of leadership that never needs threats. These are principles I've learned from studying great leaders and from my own mistakes over the years. Step one: stop and reflect on how you communicate with your team. This is crucial. If you've ever feel a threat is needed, know at that moment you've already lost their respect. That feeling isn't a signal to threaten. It's a signal that you need to rebuild your leadership credibility. Step two: invest in relationships before you need them. The leaders who never have to threaten are the leaders who have built genuine relationship with their teams. They've invested time in knowing their people. They've shown they care about them as humans, not just as workers. They've built trust through consistency. Step three: develop your people relentlessly. When you genuinely invest in developing your team's skills, knowledge, and potential, you rarely face performance issues that might tempt you to threaten. Because people who feel developed, valued, and supported naturally want to perform. Step four: lead with vision, not fear. Paint a compelling picture of where you're going and why it matters. People don't need to be threatened to follow a vision they believe in. They need to be inspired, equipped, and empowered. Then there's step five: remember that there's no room in leadership for threats. Not with your employees, not with your team members, not with your vendors, not with anyone. The moment you resort to threats, you've abandoned leadership and embraced manipulation. Here is my challenge to you today. Examine your leadership. Have you been relying on threats, even subtle ones, to motivate your team? Have you been using fear as a management tool? If so, it's time to change. Remember Mark chapter 12. The religious leaders threatened. Jesus. The religious leaders used their position. Jesus built relationships. The religious leaders feared losing control. Jesus gave control away. Which kind of leader do you want to be? You can start today by building the kind of leadership that never needs threats. Leadership based on service, relationship, development, and vision. That's the kind of leadership that changes lives and builds lasting impact. Thank you for watching. If this helped you, hit the like button, subscribe for more leadership content, and share this with a leader who needs to hear it today. I appreciate it. God bless you. Until next time.